SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste, hello everyone. Welcome again to my NPTEL course on interior design. We are at the lecture number 39 today, and we are focusing on interior design through the lens of future roadmap and interesting opportunities and challenges. So we are going to discuss this with the help of, some case studies, some interesting literature, some experiments, and we are going to specially talk about textiles and architecture. It's a very, very specified field, but we can't do everything technically in this one lecture, but we can at least focus on interesting experiments and opportunities that the fusion of textiles and architecture create for us as interior designers. And of course, there's a list of references. So when we talk about textiles and space making, there is a long history which showcases this kind of, potential of space making within the domain of textile crafts, specifically focusing on the techniques of weaving. So when we talk about, textiles and architecture, role, significance and importance of weaving in architecture, and of course at a structural level also, we often come across this German architectural theorist Gottfried Semper. And Semper, is known for 4 elements of architecture, his works that were published in 1851, where he emphasizes on earth for the foundation, wood for construction, textile for enclosure, and fire for climate. So basically there is this kind of a classification. There is a material, there is an associated technique, and there is an application aspect when we talk about the architectural application or the space making application. So Semper, also believed in artworks and this interesting play of art and architecture, fusion of textiles and architecture. Also believed that paint was used on classical buildings as a protective material. So for decoration, aesthetics, as well as a layer of protection. So there are several works by Semper, and I have just tried to put an overview or summary of these. Some of the slides from this lecture are also a part of my previous NPTEL course, Role of Craft and Technology in Interior Architecture. And I thought it could be very interesting to talk a bit about this when we are discussing experimentation in interior design. So, Semper also talks about color, and that color had symbolic associations. It's a great artistic expression. And this is the kind of inventory that I was talking about, which I find very, very useful and very insightful. So there is this 3-layer order where we are talking about material, associated technique, and the basic space making element where we see the application of, this material and technique to build this element for space making. So here we are talking about clay. Associated technique is with the ceramics, and the element could be hearth. Now the wood, of course, associated with carpentry and for the making of roof. And since we are talking specially about the fusion of textiles and architecture, this is also highlighted here. So textile, the technique of weaving, and the creation of enclosures. So that is possible utilizing textiles as material palette, utilizing the technique of weaving, and then creating these enclosures. And for stone, it is masonry and predominantly creating substructure. So these are some of the colored depictions from Zemper's early travels around Europe. And here also we see that there is highlighting of color, there is an importance to artistic expression, there is a focus on matter and architecture, focus on details, building elements. So a lot of works which are done by Zemper highlight this profound interrelationship between material, making, maker, the expression, the techniques, the skills. So if we see the 1842 works focusing on science, industry and art, there are proposals for the development of a national taste in art at the closing of the London Industrial Exhibition. And Zemper talks about the necessity of inventions and the advancement of arts and sciences. There's another work which is quite famous, Comparative Theory of Building. It reviews all building types, their locations, methods of building, and histories. 1859, Style in the Technical and Tectonic Arts or Practical Aesthetics. Very interesting and very referred to work. So there Zemper discusses extensively the use of materials within arts, crafts and architecture, details involved in the tectonic arts, and very interesting aspects about tactility, matter, architecture, art, expression. So when we say the fusion of textiles and architecture, it's not something new. The fusion of textiles and architecture, including the processes, techniques, the materials involved, has a long and winding but largely neglected history. Only in recent times have theorists, architects, engineers, textile designers, material scientists also, and artists expressed a renewed interest in the possibilities that the combination allows. And this combination and experiments centering on this fusion are of primary interest to me as an individual, as a designer, and as a professor of architecture, interior design, design thinking. So the German architect and theorist Gottfried Zemper wrote extensively on the significance of art and architecture. The first structure, the original abode of man, required not just structure, but the weave, the knot, the textile, and the tangible. So Zemper talks about the structural implications of a weave or knot that we could create while focusing on textiles as base material palette and create tangible, structurally intact enclosures and similar build forms out of it. Textiles provide protection from heat and cold, absorb noise, give control of the amount of light entering the view. Their manifold characteristics and application potentials make textiles a highly interesting architectural material. Textiles further possess very special, sensually tangible, often poetic aesthetics. So there are a lot of pieces of literature and scholarly works and historical examples that showcase this interrelationship between architecture and textiles and interesting applications and new possibilities that could emerge out of the fusion. Being simultaneously a functional technique and a symbolic means of representation, the knot was a mediating figure between the ritual act, the technique of making, and the actual work of art or craft. In time, the motif of the knot was developed further in the more complex techniques of the braid. So what you see here on screen, my braid, that's also structural actually. There is a proper technique to it. It holds the entire braid in place. So complex techniques of the braid, the reed, the seam, and the weave, all constituting primordial symbols of ordering. So we see this also in our built forms, in furniture, in the cords that we use, the kind of clothing and apparel that we wear, Even the jeans that, some of us wear also has a certain weave or a stitch to it which holds all the fabrics together and keeps it in place. So there are, of course, structural details when we zoom in and look through that lens. So here you can see some of the demonstrations where we see the structural, intactness and structural integrity imparting details of these textiles. So whether it's kind of a braid or knot or weave. So here we can see some complex structures. So when we combine 2 or 3 modules and intertwine or interlace them, there is more structural stability. So in his drawings above of crochet and knitting, Zemper clearly illustrates the potential for structural arrangements and space-defining qualities that textile crafts possess. Textile art, according to Zemper, had a significant influence on the development of architecture. So this is very important, the premise of this entire lecture and discussion, and also a sort of a hypothesis on which I'm still building on. And a lot of research works that we are doing here at IIT Roorkee through PG and PhD thesis do focus on aspects like this. And today I'm going to show you the findings of one of the theses which focuses on this aspect. Simple textile techniques of the weave and the knot constitute the joining techniques of structural elements which could also be seen in the Maori architecture, which is a very specific and distinct architectural style and very specific context. These techniques stood in complete contrast to the building techniques of early European explorers. And we do see a lot of demonstration of fusion of architecture and textiles at different eye levels for making different space making / building elements. And there may be a diverse inventory showcasing different motifs, weaving patterns, etc., based on which communities involved and which part of the world do these weaving techniques come from. This is another very interesting illustration of weaving techniques if you look here. The similarities with both Maori architecture and arts are astounding. We also have references of these kinds of weaving techniques and patterns and applications, of course, from India also, whether it's your cot or, another piece of furniture and so on. These are some of the applications and contemporary expressions when we talk about fusion of architecture and textiles. So this is a cultural complex that you see on the screen. The spectacular glimmering facade that we see over here is a eulogy to Zemper's clothing or dressing. A supple, ornate surface draped over a tectonic volume, a Zemperian notion of textile becoming architectural style. So this is a contemporary expression drawing inspiration from Zemper's works. This is another example or application that you see over here. So the Paris-based architect Dominique Peru is famous for his explicit and extensive textile-based architectural urban designs. This is interesting. For more than 16 years, he has been researching the relationship between textiles and architecture as part of his broader project on the contemporary city. So these interrelationships between, textiles and architecture, weaving and space making is something that also captures my interest and attention. And we are continuing to work on this as a small research group here at IIT Roorkee, me and my students, and the kind of projects that we are doing. This is another very, very interesting and fascinating exploration. This is a collaboration between the famous Shigeru Ben and equally famous Arup. And they have tried to capture and demonstrate architecture and textiles through the vocabulary of this timber fabric that we see over here for creating experimental spaces and enclosures. Contemporary architectile techniques make use of woven knotted structures. Research into such structures has been led by Advanced Geometry Unit of Arup, about which I was mentioning. And the AGU's work is characterized by a highly mathematical topological approach, as is evidenced by their research into knot diagrams. So, those weave diagrams, knot diagrams, coil diagrams, braiding diagrams that I was showing you from Zemper's portfolio, they do have, applications in contemporary expressions, and they do form the basis of a lot of experimentation that is happening around textiles and architecture. So AGU has also studied the topology of the weave and its application to large-scale structural systems. This technique, called macro weaving, is the discrete bending or compression of shell elements rather than fabrics to form tension-only surfaces. So they are still exploring macro weaving and related techniques and methods of creating large-scale structural applications employing textiles and architecture. This is another interesting example. This is a tower, it's a design prototype. I'm actually not sure if it is built for real, but this was a competition entry, and it shows very interesting contemporary fusion of textiles and architecture, and this kind of a weaving that we see over here, and the coiling enclosure in the facade, and this entire space which is engulfed within this is the kind of interesting example which again shows fusion of textiles and architecture. So there are these transparent and translucent membranes which constitute the entire facade of the tower. So the project has solved major problems in the use of textiles in architecture and has made weaving a building a potential reality. So this is a very interesting experiment. I found it quite fascinating. Since we are talking about the fusion of textiles and architecture, I'm going to give a very overview, kaleidoscopic picture of different fabric types, their properties, and what they could be utilized for when we talk about applications in interior design. Now, these are very technical points of discussion, and I will not be able to tell everything in depth, but we have tried to put up some inventories and charts and highlight some important information. So starting with weaving, of course, just trying to tell it in a very overview manner. A lot of us may be from the weaving background or from NIFT or from that kind of an associated field. But for the rest of us, weaving is a method of textile production in which two distinct sets of yarns or threads that you see over here, the weft and the warp, they are interlaced at right angles to form a fabric or cloth. It's a very, very structural way of creating things because there is a structure when we try to, put things together, the two yarns, and we try to interlace them. So there are different kinds of weaves, and again, just looking at visuals and not getting into the theory or the technical details about it, I'm just showcasing you the most popular and predominant kinds of weaves. So there is a plain weave which we see over here, the warp and the weft. This is twill weave. We can see the differences already. There is basket weave, there is satin weave. So the patterns are different, the way of weaving is different. This is a jacquard weave, this is a knit weave. There is an uncut pile weave and there is a cut pile weave. So these are some of the kinds of weaving patterns. Now, if you were to know a little more about these, you could research them or you could write to me or reach out to me, because there is a lot of data and prototyping experiments that we have done, but it's difficult to show everything due to the limited time. So I was talking about these kinds of inventories, and here we have highlighted some popular types of fabrics and what are their interesting properties which help us, use them for certain applications. So there is voile, there is poplin, there is muslin, and some of the properties when we talk about voile, so it's lightweight, it drapes and gathers very well. It could be used in accessories. Then for poplin, soft and medium weight, good wear resistance, but poor crease resistance. And it is perfect for making banners or table drape displays in stores, etc. So for interior design projects, there may be certain uses of these fabrics. Then there is muslin, low moisture absorption, smooth and delicate, good drapability, light to medium weight, low crease resistance. And it is the primary fabric of chair and sofa, also used in curtains and window shades. So these are the applications for interior design projects or interior architecture projects. There is also the famous and popular georgette, there is gaze, there is satin. And when we talk about georgette, it is a sheer fabric, very lightweight. It is used for interlining or lining. It is used for a lot of accessories. Satin has a nice luster. It has a smooth surface. And it is used for interior furnishing fabrics, upholstery, etc. We did talk about furnishings, fabrics, upholstery. So quite used there. We have velvet. It is smooth and soft, thick and bulky, good warmth retention, good drape, good crease resistance. It is also extensively used for upholstery, curtains, cushion covers for interior design projects. There is flannel, there is drill. Now, drill has very high tensile strength. That's an important part, and this could be then explored and experimented for some kind of semi-structural or structural applications owing to this tensile strength. And it is used for industrial purposes, for wall coverings, and a lot of other purposes which are highlighted here. There is terry, there is denim, there is corduroy. So when we talk about terry, it is very absorbent and comfortable. It is used for a lot of accessories, especially focusing on the kids. Denim resists snags and tears, so it also has applications at varied levels. And corduroy, again, it is used for draperies and upholsteries owing to the properties that it has, the material properties. There is also chiffon, there is cambric, there is single jersey knits. When we talk about chiffon, they also have a set of properties which make it eligible for very many uses. And when we are talking about structural applications and experimentation, I'm always looking for fabrics which have high tensile strength or which can respond to other kinds of forces that our built forms and structures are subjected to. So cambric also has a high tensile strength, and therefore it is again used in furnishing industries. So that's a very interesting and extensive use of cambric. Then we have double jersey knit, we have more kinds of knits, and all of these have different properties and they are used for different purposes. So here this one is also used for a medical purpose. So this is again a sort of an inventory, and I'm just trying to highlight the possibilities of this fusion between textiles and architecture and interior design, and focusing specially on interior design, specific use of upholstery, for drapery, for some kind of space making applications which are not showcased here in this inventory, but I will try to showcase them through the experiments that I'm going to show in the subsequent slides. And finishes, textures, those kinds of detailing could be done through these different fabrics. Then there are more of these, fleece knits, French terry knits, and so on. And since not all of us are from this background, they may be new for us to learn about, but it's a good exposure and it's a good piece of information. So again, like here, if you talk about the French terry knits, it has warmth retention, it has a very high dimensional stability. So accordingly, we could think about the applications and we could do a lot of experiments and design prototypes accordingly. More of these over here. So within knits also there is a variety, and all of these demonstrate different kinds of properties. So like this one over here, if you see the velour knits, they also are used for the upholstery purpose, which is in great demand in interior design projects. Now I was talking about some experiments focusing on all the above that we just saw. So these are the findings of one of the PG theses which are done at IIT Roorkee, and this work is done by my student Isha, and it was a pleasure and honor supervising her because she has done a lot of hard work. And we have also presented these findings in 3 conferences, and we are working on journal papers based on them. So basically, she was trying to investigate weaving, and its structure, types, and trying to understand the potential of weaving technique and create space making applications. And she was primarily focusing on the case of Kerala, but before that, of course, she also created this comparative inventory which highlights the cases from all over India where we see the potential fusion between weaving techniques and space making applications. So it's a 4 objective inquiry, and it is very rigorous and very interesting work. So not everything is visible here on the screen, but this is the data collection framework. Like I said, it was a very rigorous on and off field work. So a lot of frameworks, inventories, flowcharts, and meticulous methods of working on site and then doing experiments after coming back. So all those frameworks we see over here. And these are different weaving crafts of India, and especially focusing on Kerala over here. And we were also looking at specific case of the, houseboats, and where we see the application of weaving in creating those enclosures and structures. So she was looking at the coconut weaving, and she was also looking at the cane and bamboo craft, especially for the case of Kerala, while also mapping the other techniques and other material aspects from the state when we focus on weaving. So this is the bamboo weaving craft and some details about it, and this is the coconut weaving craft and some details about it. These are only some infographical findings. There is a detailed report, and if somebody is interested, we could share the published papers once they are out in public. And basically, she also mapped the entire community, the material culture, the people who use these crafts or who are the, the knowledge bearers of this craft and who are carrying forward this legacy. And she did that entire documentation. So bamboo craft in Angamalli, and there's this coconut craft in Kumarakom. So those are the kinds of clusters she visited. Of course, more clusters, but then she narrowed on coconut and bamboo. And there were these interviews, discussions, observations, so a lot of interaction, study based approach, participatory research based methods, and then working on site with the community. And then of course she tried to document and decode the selected weaving craft of Kerala through the lens of material culture. Material culture, it will take another lecture to explain it, but it's not about only material, but it's about the entire backdrop of culture, the community involved, any aspects of trade, commerce, socio-economical, political reasons why a certain way of building is predominant, and where does the material come from, who practices it, what craft it is, all of that. So material culture is a very interesting way of establishing these interrelationships between human and surroundings, the way we see things, the way we make things. So that was her objective. Third, because I told you it's a very, very rigorous work that she did. And then, of course, objective 4 was experimenting and through prototypes demonstrating the space making potential of the weaving crafts of Kerala. So when she was trying to, produce these experiments and prototypes, before that she was also trying to understand through a 8-part lens these weaving crafts of Kerala. So, what are the societal dynamics, and some reference images, the backdrops of culture, market, craftspersons, their current status and condition. And then she was looking at another important aspect, which is the weave parameters. So, what are the underlying aspects, the warp weft ratio, spacing, directionality, weaving pattern, and also exploring bamboo and coconut. So, what is possible in bamboo versus coconut, or both of them, or to what extent? And then these are the kinds of weaves or weaving patterns that she could identify. These are only few here in on the slides. There are actually a lot more in the report. Third aspect was types of weave and pattern, and more details, whether they are traditional or contemporary, what are their physical properties, and what could happen in bamboo. For example, the plain weave, the twill weave, the hexagonal weave. And when we talk about coconut and this weaving craft from Kerala, you know, you can keep the midrib intact, focusing on the coconut, or the midrib removed, or the midrib split. So there are a lot of techniques also related to bamboo and coconut, bending, splitting, a lot more actually. So that needs to be understood. First of all, it's very important to understand the anatomy of material itself, its properties, what are the opportunities it offers, what kinds of forces it can resist, and what are the opportunities it creates for application, especially within the milieu of interior architecture. So those kinds of investigations are all a part of this thesis. Fourth important aspect, space making elements, and there are some underlying aspects, some memory association, some elements that could bring in the aspect of creating identity, for the local context, the regional identity of the state, and whether they are handcrafted or not. Some play of light and shadow could be utilized, and in what manner, ventilation and visibility. Again, potentials in bamboo and potentials in coconut, or also the challenges, and the kinds of elements that could be designed. Then she was looking at scalability, which is very important because we wanted to talk about scalability in the sense that it's possible to create certain utilitarian objects with the help of these techniques and these two crafts. But is it possible to scale them and then, diversify the product range and create new experiments? So these were all the experiments. So maximum possible length, usage in terms of square meters, what volume could be covered, all of those technical details. Sixth important aspect, applications, at what scales, in what capacity. Seventh, the longevity and durability. So the life cycle assessment matters. How much is the life? What is the longevity of these prototypes, and whether can they be also utilized in large scale projects and for future possibilities. And lastly, very important, sustainability. We are talking about SDGs, we are talking about circularity, we are talking about all these important aspects. So environment sustainability, social sustainability, economic sustainability. I would go on to also add aesthetic sustainability and a lot more aspects of sustainability that we are focusing on. So that was her 8 point in this 8 point matrix where she was trying to investigate and analyze these weaving techniques. And these are the experiments that, we finally prototyped and came up with. So the space making element here is door. And where does the inspiration from joinery comes? So sandwich joinery inspired from the basket, which is this. And then how it is constructed. So these are the working drawings, like 3D exploded views, and we see the application of weaving techniques here. At the level of space making element, which is door. The next space making element she could explore is window. And again, what were the inspiration for weaving patterns, for the designs, and what kinds of designs were, finalized and experimented with, and they are working drawings with proper design recommendations, different permutation combinations, variations possible within the space making element. Everything was mapped in great detail. Then this is railing, and this is very interesting here. Use the concept of cross pollination of two materials, so stainless steel and bamboo. So, of course, some armature and some weave and put together, and this kind of a system which was designed. This is for the partition wall, and here the inspiration for interlocking comes from the traditional product that this community makes, and then based on that, this kind of experimentation was done, and then this prototype was designed. This is a partition wall, and here some kind of understanding of parametric design was also employed, and some software simulations were done. We see here the code used to generate the parametric design, and then it was applied over here. So this is a very contemporary expression utilizing weaving as a technique, and this craft from Kerala, and designing the contemporary expression in the space making element of partition wall. So very interesting experiment. We also see the application in the entire facade itself, and it could be designed, accordingly, looking at the dimensions. So the scalability was achieved through modular design, and these modules could be repeated in permutations and combinations to come up with interesting patterns and interesting details. And a lot of variations and interesting patterns are created through this. So this is the detail of the facade itself. More details when we talk about facade, and here also we can design an entire system, like an integrated system cross-pollinating materials. Going a further step, we could also cross-pollinate two crafts or two techniques, but of course that's another elaborate experiment altogether, and one of my students is actually working on that now, moving ahead from this experiment and cross-pollinating with another technique, and then deriving and designing space making applications out of that. This is for the ceiling, and this is the inspiration for design. So we always look at what the community does, what is their understanding of the material and technique, and we try to learn from their skills and their knowledge, and then sitting with them, working with them, showing them these designs, taking their inputs, and then of course doing some software simulations and physical prototyping and model making. Then we come up with these kinds of experiments, and these are on proper scale with working dimensions. So all these possibilities and experiments are quite fascinating, and a lot of work still needs to be done. So if anybody amongst you wants to join hands and work further with us, you're more than welcome to write to me. This is again a partition wall, again very, very interesting, and taking cues and inspiration from, surroundings, and learning from the craftspersons and community skills, and then trying to design these elements. So this was all about the experimentation, interesting opportunities focusing on interior design projects, where I specially talked about weaves and fabrics and textures, and interlacing textiles and architecture for creating interesting space making avenues. And the next lecture is actually the last lecture of the course, and I'm going to summarize all that we learned in this week number 8. These are the references, quite a lot of them. You could always refer to these. There are books as well as websites. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.